Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome to today's DevOps.com program brought to you by Techstrong and Plutora. My name is Cody J. Brown. I'm the host of Techstrong Learning, and we have an exciting presentation ahead. First, I do need to cover just a couple of housekeeping notes. Today's session is being recorded, so if you miss any of our discussion, maybe you'd like to rewatch or share with a friend, the on-demand recording will be made available shortly after we conclude our live session today. If you have any questions, we'd like you to send those in to us using the Q&A tab. You can find that Q&A tab on the right side of your screen, along with a few other options. You'll see that there's a chat tab, and we'd like you to use that for more general comments. Let us know from where you're tuning in or maybe what role you play in your org. And we will have a few polls throughout today's program, so please participate there. Also, if you click on the Handouts tab, you'll find a copy of our slides available for download. And of course, before we close out, we will be giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So be sure to stick around for the duration of our program. So our topic today is 2023 predictions, the state of software delivery, hints from the 2022 State of VSM report. I'm joined by Rupert Field, Director of Duffel Bag Consulting, and Bob Davis, CMO at Plutora. Rupert, Bob, thank you both so much for being here. Bob, do you want to get us kicked off?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. And I will, on behalf of Plutora, I want to welcome you to the webinar today as well. Thank you all for joining us. Appreciate you taking the time. I know you have a lot of choices, and it's great to have you on board. I'm excited about this. I will say that I met Rupert through my efforts with the Value Stream Management Consortium, which is a group of vendors, customers, consultants, and DevOps subject matter experts. I mean, you name it, we've got a smattering of all kinds of people, and they're all connected by their passion to improving the state of software delivery. And value stream management is a component of that. There are a lot of aspects, and we're going to talk about several today. Rupert and I have had a great time talking about this. One of the things that he did was work heavily on the research report that we developed out of the consortium called the 2022 State of VSM. And in there, we have some interesting data. So we're going to look at that data and see how it applies to what we might see next year. As Cody mentioned, my name is Bob Davis. I'm the CMO at Plutora. Many of you probably know me, and we're going to have a great time on this little journey for the next hour. And that's me. I want to turn it over to Rupert a little bit and let him introduce himself a little bit more thoroughly than I did. Rupert?
Thank you, Bob. And hello, everyone. Absolutely amazing to be able to do these sessions with so many of you from all over the world. Awesome that we've got people across the States, all the way across Europe. So just fantastic. And it's really, really interesting topic. Bob, thank you. As Bob mentioned, I'm a bit of I've got a consultancy, Duffel Bag Consulting, but I'm a bit of a jack of all trades, and I'm really enjoying the work that I've been doing with the Value Stream Management Consortium, not least the 2 State of VSM reports, the 2021 and 22 reports. We also recently did a Flowtopia in Las Vegas, our first conference, where really we're just getting into everything I love. So, the way I would describe myself is I'm a practitioner in that I make mistakes as fast as possible. I'm a coach, so I help others make mistakes as fast as possible. And I'm a learner, discovering new ways to make mistakes. And everything that we're doing, all the conversations I have with Plutora, all the work we've been doing in the Value Stream Management Consortium is all about all of this. So I love it.
Yeah, we're excited. We're definitely excited about this. And we were laughing in the pregame here where, Rupert and I had a conversation about, this topic as we were finishing up our slides here, and it took us well over an hour and a half. So our biggest challenge today is going to get, is going to be able to get through this talk track in the space of time that we have. And part of that is that we really, really want you to ask questions throughout the webinar. There's only so many predictions we could fit in, but we have opinions of other things. If you want to know or ask questions, by all means, we're happy to entertain them. As we go through today, we are going to touch very briefly just on what is VSM, just to, put a level set. VSM has some, ambiguous fringes. So we want to make sure we have a kind of a good understanding before we get started on predictions about where the baseline is. And we will talk about the state of software delivery that we learned about through the efforts Rupert outlined, the state of the market report, the Flotopia, which was a plethora of great information from some very smart people that had a lot to say about not only their specific state of software delivery, but where people thought it might go. So we can bring all that to bear on this discussion. We also are very keen, very aware of the macroeconomic impact. And I think we can't go about talking about predictions in the future without, understanding what we're up against, the headwinds of the economy. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And we'll put those two things together and say, okay, what will 2023 look like? And we will do that through the course of this hour. Now, before we get kicked off too thoroughly, we want to do a poll. So we want to understand a little bit about, the audience we have here with respect to how your software delivery looks like, or what your software delivery looks like today. The notion that, it's kind of the wild, wild west, as we like to say here, that we do all things differently and we have problems coordinating and that sort of thing, all the way to, a fully implemented platform that allows you to measure the value delivered and provides great insight, visibility, and optimization of the value delivered. And then in between, if you're really more of on the DevOps side and you're looking to do more orchestration and maybe that's worked, or maybe you're more on the planning side, your PMO office is strong and your OKRs are there. Just want to get a sense of what you think you're at. Rupert, based on what you've seen, what would you expect, that distribution of answers to look like?
Well, short version, distributed. So I think I actually think it's one of the reasons this is such an interesting topic is that and this is something we're going to get into this more when we talk about the data and the research from the State of VSM report. But some of the leaders, and I'm sure we've all read about, how Netflix is doing it, how Google's doing it, and other leading players. But a lot of people are still doing things, the normal way, the way that they always have done. And a lot of people are then at varying different spots, whether they're focusing on their kind of improving their DevOps pipeline, their software delivery pipeline in terms of the mechanics of it, and focusing on, CI/CD, or they've been wrestling a lot with Agile and trying to avoid doing work for the sake of work's sake and making sure that it's got good customer feedback. It's that that we're delivering the right things, and so it's the organizations that I've worked with and talked to are all in quite different spaces and are all having quite different challenges. So I would expect quite a good spread. However, I would have expected more than 0 on the last one, which is fascinating.
I would have expected a little bit more than 0, but I definitely think, I look at this and I say, wow, a year ago, the first one where we all do things differently, we have problems coordinating, would, I think, be quite a bit higher. And I think this is encouraging to see that, lower and people really starting to do some transformational work, both whether it's on the DevOps side where you're orchestrating releases, or you're working more on the planning side where you're spending a lot of time getting your goals and objectives, your OKRs squared away. I think that's excellent. The audience gets, I think, some kudos for that. I think you're a little further along than many of the folks that we talked to. Would you agree with that, Rupert?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely seeing a bit of a resurgence in OKRs. And I think some of that resurgence is coming from more kind of traditional program and project management thinking, but it's definitely being adopted in product centric, value driven organizations as well. just as a way of having that strategic level understanding and connecting the good work that, that's happening on the ground at the, with, coming from, whether you're coming from DevOps or from Agile's kind of point of view, or even from SRE point of view, and you're at the coalface doing the real work and creating the value. And then leadership saying, well, this is all amazing, but we still want that control. And OKRs are, I think, coming into and filling that gap. I think there's a really interesting point about VSM platforms here, which is that, and this is something that we talked about quite extensively in at Flowtopia in Las Vegas, the VSM conference, but also at the DevOps Enterprise Summit, that we've got this new thing that, value stream management has kind of come back as a term, and we'll come back onto what that means in a minute. But essentially, it comes all the way back from the Toyota production system and lean, and it's now coming more and more relevant because we've suddenly got the technology that means that we can. And this is just fascinating, but it's still early days.
Yeah.
I think this poll absolutely confirms that.
Yeah. And OKRs, for those, there was a question, that's objectives and key results. So it's the notion of the planning organization tying the strategic goal of the company. So you translate the strategic goal of the company, whatever that might be, to a series of objectives and key results, which then get broken down into workflows, what Agile would call value streams, even back in the earlier days. And those then, are how resources and people, teams, et cetera, are prioritized and enabled by the organization. That then flows through to a release process, which is something that appears to be a little bit further along. And that's typical. I think we can close the poll now and move on, because I think we're getting into some interesting things here. We talked about VSM, and we're not going to spend a ton of time on this. We've had a number of webinars, and the topic is often seen on the airwaves here. But Rupert, you look at this diagram, this Gartner diagram, and what do you see as far as how do you tie that together to VSM?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. So it's a deceptively simple diagram. Mm-hmm. So the way I would describe value stream management is it's just thinking about the flow of work through any organization that results in a customer pulling value from that system. And obviously this diagram does say that, but it means, starting from having a good idea, or a customer coming up and saying, hey, I really want this thing, or I want to change to this feature. And then that going all the way through business planning, putting that on the roadmap, and then planning that at team level, and then putting it all the way through your product delivery pipeline until the customer has the value in their hand. And obviously we can all do lots and lots of work, but it only becomes real when it's in the hands of our customers. And even then, we don't know whether they're going to get value from it or not. And this is where value stream management comes in. So it comes from, as I mentioned, the Toyota production system and lean. And now, because of the dawn of the value stream management platform, we've now got the ability to basically map our value streams in organizations digitally using APIs and gain visibility of it in a way that when you're creating cars, you can easily see the manufacturing line. But when you're creating technology products, it's frequently much more difficult, and often we're organized by functions. And so the value streams are the connections between all the work across those functions that result in, your product or your service.
Yeah, I kind of, one of the Gartner has the, I look at this and I simply see a management, a management plane or a control plane above the delivery pipeline. And as such, we often refer to it as a catwalk above the factory floor. So if you imagine yourself walking above a factory floor and being able to see what's going on, being able to alert people of what might be happening on one end versus another, being able to make sure handoffs are done seamlessly, being able to make sure that information that occurs out with the customer is more immediately made available to the developers that can do something about it. And the priority is in the context of the goals of the company. So you kind of tie together the customer need and the business focus, the business strategy, to the value they're getting and everything that happens in between. Forrester has a great definition. I think one of the very first ones I saw, which is a combination of people, process, and technology that maps, optimizes, visualizes, measures, and governs the business value flow across a heterogeneous enterprise software delivery pipeline. That's what it is. So it's typical that these pipelines are filled with disparate groups, products, processes, and the management plane normalizes those and allows them to interact in a collaborative, constructive, efficient way. And that optimizes the value delivered. And that's this whole market segment, which really kicked off in 2018 and has really come forward now to where the players that are involved in working on software delivery are some of the biggest names in software today. So it's exciting to be a part of it. And I think it's a real opportunity to improve the software delivery process across organizations, businesses worldwide. The question is, right back to Rupert's first comment, it's a deceptively simple diagram. And the implementation can be difficult. So let's look at that. Let's look at the implementation, kind of where we're at. Rupert, why don't you start and kind of explain what's going on with this slide? We can get a roadmap of the slide, and then we can talk about what it's saying.
Absolutely, yeah. Cheers, Bob. So I think this is a really interesting chart. We've pulled this from the State of VSM 2022 report, and the steps. Yeah, so vision, identify, organize, map, all the way through to adapt. These are the steps that we've kind of organized in terms of the value stream management implementation roadmap. So if you want to start doing value stream management in its most modern form, this is a roadmap for how to do that. And you can see that it's organized, and I'm sure some of you have already noticed it's organized in terms of people, then process, then technology. So in terms of what this slide is showing, it's showing that lots and lots of people have started building visions and identifying their value streams in their organizations. And we're completely agnostic. They could, one of the things that we really want to achieve, and I know that Plutora are on exactly the same page on this, is let's kill this distinction between business and technology. It's one organization delivering value, and some people are going to have more technical skills, and others are going to have more commercial skills. But fundamentally, it's one organization. So So in terms of who's answering this, it could be anyone. Although because the technology teams have been driving a lot of this thinking about software delivery, as you'd expect, we do have a bias towards technical people responding to the survey. But the big takeaway from this is we've got lots of, 2/3 of our respondents have got through to mapping. And value stream mapping has been around for quite a long time, and again, comes from manufacturing. Much fewer, we've got a significant drop off when it comes to connecting DevOps tool chains or software delivery pipelines so that we've got automated flow. And obviously the big players like Amazon, who are dropping hundreds of thousands of changes into production per day, have absolutely already done this and mastered it. And then we've got connecting in terms of, have you not only connected your software delivery pipeline, but have you also put that that reporting layer? Have you built that gantry over your manufacturing line, your catwalk, as you put it, Bob? And then are you starting to inspect that and adapt it depending on what your needs are? Do you need faster flow, or do you need to be shipping different features? These are big questions, which come right to the heart of this. So 2022, what was going on in software delivery? Main takeaway, a lot of people are now thinking about value stream management. And actually, we had a fascinating conversation with a firm out in Vegas who have completely architected their organization by value streams rather than by function. But most haven't. This is a nascent development, a nascent industry, and obviously the poll which we just did confirmed that.
Yeah, I think it's important to, and you touched on it, Rupert, and I think for the audience, one of the things that's really important to put in from the standpoint of adding color is when we, certainly from Plutora's point of view, when we go to the market and we talk to people about improving software delivery and value stream management, et cetera, we're talking to Global 2000 organizations that are from what I like to refer to as traditional businesses. So, it's the banks of the world, it's the insurance companies, it's the manufacturing companies, the pharmaceutical and healthcare companies, telcos. Some of these organizations have been around for literally hundreds of years, and they have significant investment in processes, people, technology that spans probably not 100 years, but it goes back fairly good way. And you have processes that are well entrenched, and they're well entrenched and they're carefully architected for a reason, usually having to do with things like compliance or security. I mean, if you're a bank and you're responsible for the most critical data that banks have, the personal financial information of their customers, and there's a breach, I don't have to tell you what that means to the future of that bank's PR program. It's a horrible scenario, not to mention the risk that it puts the subscribers to that bank in. So you're not going to get the folks that are responsible for the development of those back-end systems to all of a sudden start building iPhone apps to implement the stuff. There's reasons why those systems are there. So in order to develop and bring out a software delivery platform or process that is seamless and goes from idea to cash in the way that Gartner had that diagram, I've got to wrestle all that to the ground. I've got to figure out how that works, where it goes. It's incredibly daunting. And so the gap between I've planned it, I understand what I'm doing, I'm starting to get good at identifying things. I always laugh that this step is, now I just have to connect. Like that's an easy thing. And that's where it really gets interesting, not just the technology of it, but if some of you are going and doing some of this work and you bring up this idea to another organization, they may have a whole different context. So there's internal selling, there's understanding how people are doing. So it's a big job. It's a hard thing. And we asked them, these same folks, what they were up against. What are the hurdles? What are the issues that you're facing? And really found this to be really super interesting. And again, keep in mind the persona. Your high-flying unicorn tech companies, as Rupert mentioned, AWS, Netflix, folks like that, they had the benefit of starting from ground zero with the notion of building a highly agile, highly capable software development system. They didn't have those many years of history and baggage really to deal with. So they were able to start from scratch. So they avoided some of the problems that you folks will have as you try to do a transformation across your entire business if you're from an organization similar to what we're describing, a global organization with hundreds of applications, many of which need to be organized and have huge dependencies. So these are some of the problems that our audience had. Rupert, maybe you could kind of frame this up and we can have a bit of a discussion on what folks are seeing. And by the way, I would love it if the audience, as you look at these, if you see one of these that, oh my God, that was huge for us, type it in the chat session. We can get some color from you guys as to where you might be really, hitting up with some challenges as we talk. Rupert?
Yeah, absolutely. Cheers, Bob. There's something that Bob and I talked about was the kind of the chasm in terms of adoption, in terms of like new ways of working. And we saw this with Agile and DevOps in the last 20 years. We've seen it with, site reliability engineering as well. In terms of just value stream management, one of the big striking pieces from the 2022 report was that we saw a 10% increase in respondents whose areas were explicitly aligned to value streams, which is clearly the respondents are generally more interested in the topic, but that's still a big jump. And so part of the reason, and when Bob and I were talking about having this conversation, one of the big things was, well, what's going to happen next? Are we going to see that adoption take off? What's the economic background going to mean for these developments? But also, just what's sticky right now? And all of these points in this donut chart. It doesn't matter if you're talking about VSM or kind of any new adoption, but they're really interesting. A lot of them are people. These are people problems rather than technology problems, but they are pervasive. There's an expression, I think it's fairly universal, but FUD, which is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Which is it just kills creativity, kills confidence, kills experimentation, and a lot of these talk to that as a blocker. Bob, I was going to ask you. I mean, you've obviously you're working with a lot of different organizations. What are you seeing in terms of the software market right now? Who's measuring organizational outcomes? Who's on the journey?
Well, first of all, I think to frame the answer to that, I look at this slide and I look at this data and I see something really super interesting. If you start at the top where it says we don't have leadership buy-in, and then you kind of go down, that's for almost 15%. We don't have anyone to lead an effort. Really similar, right? If I have leadership, I have somebody that will lead the effort, that will follow. No resources for this. So if I have leadership buy-in and I'm got people that are focused that's the first thing they're going to do. That would be part of enabling that individual. So you're looking at almost 50% of the issues being around finding a sponsor, finding a coalition of the willing across the organization to come together and lead an effort. We're seeing that. That's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing the awareness that there needs to be something done. So if we go back and we look at, kind of the previous slide, this stuff on the top where you have vision and identify, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing people recognizing that they've got to do something, that the current methods don't work, and they're starting to plan it, but they're running into a bit of a challenge when they try to expand to really fixing, if you will, their software delivery. In order to do that, it requires that they reach into other parts of the organization. Very few applications are the domain of a single team with no dependencies. So the minute I have to influence someone I'm dependent on to kind of participate in this, now I've got to deal with what tools they have. Look at that. The very next one, we have too much proliferation of tools across the teams. So the minute I start to get some traction, I go across, more tools, more obstacles. Those tools carry with it culture, work process, field names. What do we call things? They might be different in one tool than another. Mapping all that together is complicated and, again, another hurdle. So what we're seeing is folks are interested, they get it. I'm feeling that on this call as well with the respondents to that first poll. People are getting it, they're moving forward. But expanding out to really solve the problem, that's where the challenge is. And what we see is as those individuals that are, spearheading the effort in their organizations, their biggest challenge is to be able to show the value they're going to get if they implement this. How do I, and if I'm trying to boil the ocean and put a value stream management platform in place that looks like this, the number of people, process, and technology challenges I have as I go down this implementation path are all on the screen, and it just stops people in their tracks. And I think that's exactly why we have such a large difference between, really, a half to a third of the level of success, because they're dealing with these kinds of issues. So that's the state is that. And if you think about what we see, if I look at what we see folks that are desperately trying now to build beachheads, we would call them, to build a area of strength around a particular solution area so that they can start to show the kind of value they'll get. So for example, one of the personas that comes in often, and we talked about it in the poll, is the release manager. The release manager is the people that are involved in the release process that are struggling with orchestrating a pipeline. We had a large number of folks that are really getting involved in that. It's complicated, but they're getting involved in that. So that orchestration of the pipeline, those guys are really focused on that. If they can show the value of that to the rest of the organization, they're able to expand. So this is a pretty key area where people are struggling, and now they're looking at, how do I get over that? And they're starting to think, maybe I should start small. And we'll talk more about it, but we've got some programs that we put in place as a vendor that might shed some light there. But that's the key. We'll get to that later. Rupert, that's what I'm seeing. And those are the kinds of people that the personas and the challenges and their reaction to that, which we can see. That's the human element, the stories, the sitting and having a beer after work, hearing about their challenges come to life in these reports and diagrams that we've got on the screen today. So I feel this every day.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just put a question in the chat around because you mentioned digital transformation, and it's such an interesting term because how do you finish? When have you finished your digital transformation? It might be that, and I really like Wardley mapping. I just think it's a fantastic way of actually producing a strategy for a digital transformation, because you don't want to digitalize everything, almost certainly, but also you're going to have different priorities, and every organization is unique, and I appreciate everybody on this call knows that. But one of the challenges is, and bouncing off what you've just been talking about, your experiences, mine is exactly the same. A lot of people doing a lot. And it's interesting, somebody's commented about the state of agile, saying the same thing. Mm-hmm. Too many active change programs.
Spot on.
If you're if you're working on everything, you're working on nothing. Mm-hmm. And so how do you get started? And I think that the starting small thing is really interesting. But in the context of what we're about to talk about, I think it means that some organizations are going to make really, really good decisions about where they're investing, and others aren't. And it's not necessarily, there's a big element of luck here. And one of the reasons for that is there's just so many other things going on. So how do you make a decision? How do you make decisions on whether you should be investing in, new features, or a faster pipeline, or more reliable production system, if you've got massively turbulent economics, and just wild card kind of geopolitical or macro developments happening, but again, I do think the answer is starting small. I don't want to steal the thunder from the next part of the conversation. But
yeah, we need to move on to it. And I want to as we move on, I want people to keep two of these data points in mind. One of them is we have too much proliferation of tools, that 8.6%. And the other is the one participant 853, which, by the way, I wish there were names, and that feels so it feels so odd. But Mr. 850 or Miss 853's point on the 17.8%, that's huge. That's really relevant, really good observation, because we saw in Vegas, there's definitely fatigue. People are, they've been doing a lot of transformations and there's fatigue. And now that's got a whole nother challenge, because let's talk about the economy. Anybody else seeing, concerns, the macroeconomic outlook, inflation? We have layoffs coming. I live in the Bay Area, as many of you might have seen in the chat. We've had a lot of different cuts, but they're not unique to the tech industry, but certainly a lot. We have Twitter, and there's a lot of drama there. It's gloomy. We see it all the time. And as if digital transformation wasn't hard enough, now we've thrown an elephant in the pond while you're trying to fish. We've thrown this huge economic, not we, but the world has thrown this huge economic, and the world had issues in the first place, right? It's kind of a messed up time for, macroeconomic and macro political issues. And I think that has an impact. Rupert, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're looking at part of the impact already. And I recently read Saxo Bank has an outrageous predictions report that it produces, and some of them are outrageous. Hopefully Bob and I are going to come up with some equally outrageous predictions at the end of this discussion. But we're already seeing big developments. We've seen big moves in the stock market. We've seen big moves in terms of what companies are doing, and we had a huge amount of hiring in the tech space and growth in the tech space during COVID, and a massive pivot towards digital and remote working, which is just awesome. It's kind of accelerated our evolution, I think, in terms of how we organize. But now we're seeing a bit of a step back and a bit of reaction. So we've got companies laying off in advance. We've got landlords putting up their rent in advance of knowing that their mortgage interest rates are going to go up, and the whole world is kind of getting ready for this and kind of battening down the hatches. So, one of the things that I'm super interested in, and Bob, I'd love your hot take on this, but does the definition of value, and we're talking about value stream management, but does the definition of value change in an economic downturn?
Absolutely. And that's the interesting thing. If you I'll start that by saying one of the real promises of a transformation is to do that, is to transform. It's a big effort, and the value of that is a future thing. If I build out a much more efficient, value stream oriented, get my software delivery platforms really running like, clockwork, if I achieve the level of success, even approach the level of success of an Amazon, for example, relative to their ability to deliver changes, I can see how that would benefit me. But I'm evaluating the move down that path on the basis of how much money it's going to save me this quarter. And so the value can be, the immediate value, the immediate cost savings. Maybe I can do more with fewer people. Maybe I can get an incrementally, squeeze out some cost in a particular area. And in a world where the economy is really offering so much ambiguity for the future, I can start to say, all right, well, I'm saving money. I've got to be able to improve my margins. I've got to be able to save money for a rainy day. So I'm going to evaluate any purchase I make on the basis of immediate returns. Remember those 2 points on the data: proliferation of tools. It's easy for you to say, and too many change programs. Those cost money also. So one of the things we see are efforts to consolidate tools. So it's like, well, I don't want to go too far. I want to consolidate tools. It'll be cheaper and easier if I can consolidate tools. And we're seeing that a lot. Well, that slows down an overall transformation effort, because basically I'm just replacing something I'm already doing. Maybe it'll give me some incremental cost savings, but it's not going to fundamentally change the outcome of a value stream management approach, or it's not going to change my software delivery, to being about, an Amazon-esque, thing. It's going to save me, 10% on my cost or whatever it might be. That's what we're seeing. So when we talk about people starting, they're starting to look and say, okay, how can I start to implement something that will take me to the promised land, but do so in a way that appeals to my CIO and my financial officers who are looking for cost savings. All those CIOs are being tasked with reducing costs. That's just the reality of it. So I've got to buy another tool to reduce costs. I'm going to have to save money elsewhere. So value becomes an ROI equation in immediate sense, rather than the ROI of what happens if I can deliver twice as many features to my customer with the same amount of delivery. So I'm not thrashing them. I'm just delivering more value. I know that's going to be valuable. I know that's worth money to me as an organization and worth happiness to my customer. I know that. But I'm not going to get there if I'm struggling with margins and I'm running low on capital, and I'm a public company and I've got to show growth and I've got to show profitability. It's a complicated affair, and it's going to slow down the transformation. And I think will impact the evolution of software delivery in 2023.
Completely agree. Just writing something in the chat that is about that as well. I mean, so doing the right work is really hard. Is it the right time to invest? I mean, something that Bob and I were talking about is like what happens in economic. Yeah, it's a likely economic downturn. A lot of the indicators are saying that. We don't know that that's going to happen, but it's probably going to happen. So, is it a big deal? Well, maybe, and it's going to depend. It's going to depend who you are. I'd say that, before we, as I said, we're going to come back to the kind of hardcore predictions, outrageous predictions. But one of the principles that we have at the Value Stream Management Consortium is if you're managing your value, if you're managing your value realization, and you've got good feedback, it's going to lead to organizational success. And I strongly believe that. And Bob, I know you do too. But there's a wild card here, which is, we've got increasing interest rates. We've got inflationary environment, and that means that basically, I think some of the organizations who are really good at this are going to absolutely fly. They're going to build, and they're going to already be well positioned for any downturn, and then they're going to be positioned to take advantage of any downturn as it happens in real time, because they've got that good feedback. They've got the ability to pivot, and they know about their value realization. On the other hand, there are going to be some really small organizations who are really good at it, but simply don't have the balance sheets to be able to survive, especially if they've taken on a lot of debt. So that is a bit of a wild card factor. And equally, Bob, you were talking about some of the bigger, more traditional organizations earlier. Some of them are not going to be any more competent, but they've got such a huge balance sheet. They're such big players that they're more resilient in just basic terms. But then I was going to say, just to tie that off, then they have a huge opportunity as well, because they've suddenly got this pressure to have a better understanding about their value realization, and they've got the balance sheet to make the investment.
Yeah, it is daunting though. And you know, the challenge of transforming an organization like we're talking about is not for the faint of heart, as I would say. It is a big task, and the companies that achieve it will reap incredible benefits, but it is tough. And now you've got this economic headwind. However, I've never met a recession that didn't end up with a class of companies really killing it when we came out the other side. And so how do we tie the predictions of software delivery, the challenges that are in front of us, to the future in terms of the immediate future of 2023? So let's do a quick poll. What are your biggest challenges for 2023? And we'll apply this to our predictions. And we try to hit a couple that were in the more of an internal thing, like organizing and coordinating disparate teams or orchestrating your software delivery process, but also the constraints and resources due to the macroeconomic environment. I mean, you may be completely aligned as an organization on what you need to do to fix yourselves internally, but are now saddled with various constraints that you didn't have before, that results in resources being less than you could have expected, and therefore require you to rethink how you're going to go forward with it. Again, Rupert, what would you expect to see here?
Well, again, so I was just thinking about I was talking to a couple of airlines a few weeks ago, and about their experience at the start of COVID. And obviously airlines, that was an industry that was totally disrupted. Black swan event. It should have been predictable, but really most of us didn't see it coming. And they had completely different reactions. So one essentially got rid of the first teams they got rid of were their tech teams. And then they immediately realized that they needed to re-architect and create vouchers for canceled flights and all of this kind of stuff, and then didn't really have tech teams. And the other organization cut everybody's hours, so everybody went down to part-time. And they had really, one didn't do better than the other. They had completely different pain and completely different benefit. And this is basically what I think the challenges for 2023 are. So organizing is still going to be absolutely critical across the board. Orchestration, it buys you so much flexibility. It buys you so much potential. So that you've got time, you've got the ability to make agile, aggressive decisions, alacrity, and then. Really interesting how we've got this 35% on improving the visibility between the software we're delivering and the strategic business goals. Absolutely key.
Yeah, I love this. This jives with exactly what we've seen. The number one thing is tying together business and delivery and IT, right? I mean, if I was going to just headline that, and then we saw that in Vegas, and we've seen that a lot. So that's huge. I'm interested, and I think this is reflective of the audience, and I'm thinking of our initial poll of how 64% or so were already doing the orchestration, and there was some disparate teams, but the orchestration was under control. So seeing this as a lower number of challenges is consistent with our audience, I believe. So this is great. So everything, I mean, basically, it's we got a little bit of everything, and so what does that mean? What does that mean? I mean, one of the things that I kind of liked, right at the beginning is, with the challenges of changing my internal organization and the macro challenges that are being thrown at me now, why bother? Why would I, why bother? Why don't I just hunker down and we'll worry about this in, next December? What do you think, Rupert?
Yeah, I mean, we could just cut some costs and it'll be fine. Probably don't do a Twitter. Don't cut everybody. That might not be the right choice. But yeah, this is just one. So this is from the State of Value Stream Management 2021 report, and this is just one factor which we pulled out. Obviously, you can see about measuring outcomes, but there's a really clear trend between top performers, high performers versus middle and low, and measuring outcomes is just so key. If fundamentally, if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't know what the outcome of what you've done is, are you gonna be successful? And if you're talking about the kind of environment that that the data is suggesting for 2023, a tougher economic environment, more expensive debt, inflation of wages probably, and so a lot of different pressures and which are challenging for organizations in lots of different ways. Then, like, how do you get through that? And I just think that your decision making needs to be really, really, really good. You might get lucky. I mean, as I really like Napoleon's expression about his generals, he kind of didn't really care, who they were or where they'd come from, as long as they were lucky. And I think that value stream management is a way of making your own luck, in the sense of let's find out what works, and let's really emphasize that feedback mechanism with our customers, but also across a whole value stream. If our teams are able to collaborate, all the way from idea to idea's been executed and it's in production, it's being used by our customers, whether that's a product or a service, doesn't matter. But then you've got a really, really powerful, genuinely agile, and I hate how agile is sometimes kind of misused and abused these days, but it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, you're going to have a genuinely great organization that is able to pivot and make the decisions that it needs to make. And so that's what's so powerful about this. And that's, that for me, that is the, why bother, you asked. That's why I would bother.
Yeah, I hear you. I think, I want to get into, with the remaining minutes here, I want to get into some of the, what we think actually will happen. And, I think if, we had this chart up earlier, and you started to talk about it. So you, you do think we're going to see increased adoption, but the question is, and it'll be spotty, but the question is, how will that play out?
Yeah. So I think it's going to be quite stratified. We're going to, I think software delivery generally, we're going to see the best get even better. And we're going to see the laggards not move much at all. And so we're going to have this kind of spreading out of how we get stuff done around here. With already some people have already made quite big strides into, and quite a lot of investment into their software delivery pipelines, and they're going to be very well positioned. Now, they don't need to be making that investment in a potential downturn. Others are going to rapidly catch up. And the other thing that we see I don't need to be a market genius to be able to, but I can easily see, looking back at previous downturns, you always see disruption coming from smaller players who are able to kind of build themselves the right way the first time around, and are then able to disrupt established big players in established markets. So I definitely see VSM doing that, and people who are using, even if you can implement value stream management, and you can start doing value stream management without a value stream management platform, and you can build your own platform. We are seeing people now make essentially the market has decided that building your own is not the answer. That was a clear change between 2021 and 2022. So in 2023, I see consolidation, and we're going to, as it says there, we're going to see increased adoption, and it's going to be imperfectly distributed. But those people who are adopting are going to suddenly have, by just going on the journey, they're going to be making kind of data-driven decisions. And they're going to realize, okay, well, actually, this seems pretty clear that, our tool chain isn't connected, and that's causing us all of these kinds of problems over here. Or on the other hand, our tool chain isn't connected, but actually our business don't know what's being released. So maybe we need to focus on that.
So to put a little bit of a pragmatic point on this, I think what we're going to see, this is my attempt at, throwing out what the numbers will actually look like. I think that people understand they need to move in this direction, but I think that the pressure on showing shorter term value and not willing to, bet on the come, if you will, and say, okay, we're all in, and in 2 years we're going to be awesome. The economic downturn is going to challenge that. Planning and coming up with a vision, we've always said, is the most critical thing. And that doesn't necessarily cost more money. I can plan and get ready. So I think we're going to see people double down on the planning. And those earlier adopters and even some of that early majority are going to start to say, okay, I don't have a big budget and I've got some challenges to roll this out big, but I'm going to start to plan. So I know where I'm going to be. So when we come out of this recession, we're ready to go. And we're going to see people doing more organizing, more planning, identifying what their value streams are, getting more crystal clear on their goals as far as what they want to see their software delivery system look like in the future, understand what they want to do with tools, understand what they want to do with that. And then I see them starting small. But let's be specific, starting small in a building block that's taking me to the vision. So if I want to build out a better mechanism to connect my OKRs to my DevOps, there are solutions I can do to do that. At Plutora, what we've done, for example, is we've taken a subset of our platform and we've made it available this week in a free trial, which we call a Quick Start Release Management. And it speaks to the very specific challenge of connecting and orchestrating just the release management components. How do I get a schedule so I understand where my releases are and what dependencies they have? And I can bring that in, and it has a relatively low overhead of how I connect it, but a very tangible value to the organization. And the implementation will never have to be ripped and replaced because it's the cornerstone to the platform that will take me to the full nirvana of having a fully implemented value stream solution. So I can plan, I know my journey, but I'm going to implement a little bit more slowly, a little bit more stepwise, so we can build our value stream solution, one agile solution at a time. And those solutions will vary according to the organization. My recommendation is find out where a big pain point is in your team that you have control over and look to solve that. And that's what we're seeing customers doing, Rupert. We're seeing people come in and say, I have a specific problem with testing or whatever, and they really want to roll on that. And that's kind of what I see. So we're gonna need to move quickly. Do you have any final thoughts on this before we start to wrap up here, Rupert?
Yeah, just one, which is firstly, I mean, I've not used your new platform yet, but the philosophy is absolutely bang on. Start small and build momentum from a grain of salt. Build some successes and then work up from there. Don't try and tackle the whole organization at once. I'm sure everybody is already. I'm sure all of our participants are already agreeing with that. But there's this prediction 3 I think is interesting. So I wanted to get your point of view on that. Just seeing movement in the top half of the chart more than the bottom, and obviously we've got these big increases here, 25% in vision and identify, and organizations that are starting to tackle those. I agree with that. I think that's spot on. But Bob, what's your thinking around seeing less movement towards the bottom?
Well, I just think that they don't have the bandwidth and resource in their organizations to really pull it off. So they're going to start smaller, and that's just you. So you're not going to make as much progress connecting your tool chain. You're not going to make as much progress getting your, being able to inspect what's going on, because you're not going to have the full, complement of data needed to make that choice. But you will be able to make big improvements on your teams and show the promise of what you can see when moving forward. So, and if you've done the planning as we've described here, then you're on the right track. We're going to need to wrap it up here. We need to get back to Cody real quick. Cody, you can come in now and let's do those plans. Those of you that have questions, please send them to us. You have our contact information, and away we go. We'll be happy to answer more questions and maybe have a part 2 on the topic. Cody?
Of course, Bob, thank you so much. And Rupert, thank you so much for joining us today as well. I really appreciate your time and your knowledge.
Absolute pleasure. Anytime. We've got at least another hour of conversation to have.
Yeah. Hopefully the audience got something out of it. Again, we appreciate your time. And I know, Cody, you have some gift cards to hand out, so we can get to that so that folks can get the real benefit, the Christmas spirit of giving at our webinar here.
Of course. So first, I'd like to remind everyone that this session was recorded. So following this, you should receive an email with a link to access the recording on demand, or you can find it living on the DevOps website at devops.com/webinars. The winners of our 4 $25 Amazon gift cards are Carla C., Cody M., James W., and Matthias C. So to our 4 winners, please keep an eye on your inbox to claim those gift cards. But if you do not happen to see that email, please do check your spam folder. I'd like to thank Plutora for sponsoring today's program. And to everyone who has hung with us for the last 60 minutes, thank you so much for being here. We really value your time, but we also value your feedback. As soon as we close out, there will be a survey that will pop up on your screen, and we'd really like you to fill that out for us. Let us know what you liked, what we could do better, or what you'd like to see on a future program. Otherwise, we hope to see everyone at an upcoming Techstrong Learning program. Have a great rest of your day, and Bob, Rupert, thank you once more.
Thank you, and thank you, Rupert.
Thank you.
Bye.